Hi everyone, sorry about that. I'm just moving around my screen. So I think we'll get started just in the interest of time. So welcome to this SixMed webinar on qualities of a good doctor. You might have seen while I was messing around on the screen. My name's Joe. I'm a medical student at Barts in the London School of Medicine and Dentistry, so it's part of Queen Mary University of London. And I'm currently doing a bit of research at the Royal Veterinary College. And I've popped my email down there if you have any questions at the end of this. Just to check beforehand, bit of housekeeping. Can everyone hear me? If you just pop in the chat if you can hear me, just to double check. Wonderful. Great, thank you very much, guys. Cool. So this talk is on the qualities of a good doctor. So we're going to be looking at the qualities of a good doctor. I'm going to briefly talk about GMC, good medical practice. And then we're going to talk a little bit on how to develop and demonstrate these kind of qualities and skills. And then we'll have a little bit of time for a Q&A. To answer any of your questions about medical school or anything I've just discussed previously. So my first question to the crowd is, what do you think are the qualities of a good doctor? But first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to go over, jump over to Mentimeter. So I used this at last week's talk. So those of you who are here, you might have used it. So if you can just go on to menti.com, or you can scan the QR code here, enter the little code 98256324, and then you're Menti. I can see someone's already on. They gave me a thumbs up, which is good. I'll give everyone a little bit of time to do that. Great, okay. So if you haven't logged in yet, the login's at the top of the screen throughout all the questions. My kind of first question is, I just want to know, while it loads. Ooh, this is new. I was essentially just going to ask people who was here last week. There's no correct answers. Everything's correct. I just want to know if people have attended last week's webinar. Just gives me a little bit of information to see where people are, what they know, so I don't repeat myself too much. Cool. Well, that's fine. If you haven't, if you weren't here last week, that's fine. We're going to go through it nice and steady. But the first real question I'm going to ask is, what do you think are the qualities of a good doctor? Because it's all good and well me telling you, I think a doctor is this, I think a doctor is that, but I want to hear from you. What do you think are the qualities of a good doctor? What do you think are the most important qualities, perhaps? Good, there we are. We've got some good words coming here. Empathy, yeah, that's the kind of stock, fundamental, really. Accountability, communication, compassionate. Compassion versus empathy, there's a good question. What is the difference between those? Professionalism, 100%. Respect, helpful. Teamwork, yes. So as a doctor, you're not working on your own, you're working within what you call a multidisciplinary team. So it depends where you are in the world and where you're exactly working in what discipline, but you're always working in a team. You're very rarely on your own. Trust, reflection. I like that, reflection. Yes, 100%. You need to have reflective practice. How do you know if you need to improve if you don't think about what you did previously? Critical thinking, yes, that goes hand in hand with the teamwork and the communication, and certainly the professionalism, accountability, honesty. Great. These are really good, guys. Well done. Just looking to see if we got any new ones. Problem solving, yep. So there's a lot of problem solving. Friendly, yep. Multitasking, 100%, 100%. You're balancing the books, aren't you, really? And that goes hand in hand again with time management. Dedication and transparency, yes. Transparency, honesty, and professionalism all go hand in hand. They're all linked in that respect. Brilliant. You guys are still keep going. Brilliant. Coordination, yep. Fantastic. Well, let's move on and let's think about where we can find some of these qualities. So I'm going to jump back here. We will rejoin Mentimeter in a bit, so don't worry if you were enjoying that. So I've spoken about what you think, what are the qualities of a good doctor. And so I'm going to start off by saying, you're not the first to think about what are the qualities of a good doctor. And in fact, you're certainly not going to be the last. And a lot of big organizations have thought about, well, what are the qualities of a good doctor? And you might have heard of an organization called the General Medical Council. So the General Medical Council are a public body. In theory, they're government owned. And they represent patients, and they represent the interests of what do patients want from doctors and what do patients expect from doctors. So the General Medical Council specifies what a doctor should be. And they kind of represent patients' interests, they protect patients' interests, and they hold doctors who break things accountable, essentially. The BMA, they're the British Medical Association, and what they do is they represent doctors' interests. So they're more of a how do you say? They're kind of more of they're representing the workers. They're a union. There's the word union. So they represent doctors' interests, and they work alongside the GMC, sometimes against, sometimes they protect their members, etc. And we have one last one, which is you may not have heard of, and that is called the MSc, the Medical Schools Council. And that is formed, it was previously formed by a load of kind of heads of different medical schools, lots of deans. They all came together and they said, well, we should probably have a council that represents the medical students, because the BMA, they allow medical students to join, but they're representing doctors, not medical students, essentially, although they do now. So the Medical Schools Council is this kind of bridge, and it's really nice, and they represent the interests of medical schools. So what I'm going to say is that the General Medical Council, because they write essentially what doctors should be, they have written a very big document, and it's called Good Medical Practice. You might have heard of it. And it is kind of the Bible. If there's anything you should have a read or know of before you go for a medical school interview, it's this book, because this book outlines everything that is important about practice, what you should follow, etc. It says working with doctors, working for patients. You can see that they work with the doctors, but they fundamentally represent patients' interests. And the wonderful thing, it's a bit of a dull read, but the wonderful thing for you guys applying to medical school is that the Medical Schools Council have gone through this 18-page document, Good Medical Practice, and have dissected and removed everything that they think is important for prospective medical students to learn. And they've translated what they expect doctors to exhibit, what qualities doctors should have. And they've said, well, medical students should show this. And so prospective students should also show this. So it kind of explains it really nicely. So both of these are really good to have a read. But a lot of my talk today is based on a lot of the content from this MSc document. And so if you don't want to read the MSc document, we're about to go through it. I've made it as easy and as palatable as possible. But definitely have a look at GMC Good Medical Practice. It's not particularly long, but it's good just to scan through it. But anyway, so this is kind of how I'm going to set up my slides. So GMC Good Medical Practice. So if some of you have read it, then you'll be very familiar with what I'm kind of going through now. But it has 4 key domains. So they talk about splitting up the roles of a doctor into 4 key domains. They have domain 1, domain 2, domain 3, domain 4. We're going to go through each of these domains. We're going to say what the GMC expect you to, what they expect a doctor to have, the qualities that a doctor has. And then we're going to see what the MSc say you guys should have as prospective doctors, as people who are going to become doctors. What should you have? And we'll have a little talk about this. So domain 1, you're going to see a lot of the things you said previously are all in this. So domain 1 is knowledge, skills, and performance. So at the end of the day, doctors are constantly learning, just as your students now, and you're learning. As you go into medicine, you're constantly learning. And in your 40, 50 years practice or what have you, you're always going to be learning. New technology comes out, etc. And so you're always going to have to keep up a good standard of practice. You don't stop learning when you leave medical school. And at the end of the day, skills and performance goes hand in hand with patient safety and care. And so the care of your patient is your first concern. And so these are the things that the GMC say, okay, this is what a doctor should have. So what does the medical school council say? What do they say prospective students should have? So they should be committed, they should be able to problem solve, they should have resilience, academic ability, insight and reflection, personal organization. So just having a look at the document, really, they say that you need to be committed to self-improvement. So students, when you're applying to medicine, you should be shown that you're always trying to better yourself. You are have a genuine interest in the medical profession, and that you want to keep up to date and improve your knowledge. And you accept that this isn't a degree where you come out knowing everything and you'll always remember it. You're always going to have to update your knowledge. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. Oh gosh, there we are. So I hope that makes sense. So that's domain 1. Domain 2 is kind of safety and quality. So we've been through the kind of doctors should know, and doctors should keep up to date their knowledge, and doctors should keep up to date their skills. So maybe the second domain is safety and quality. So at the end of the day, you're a doctor, and it sounds very cheesy, but you're dealing with people's lives. And so the GMC expects doctors to always protect and promote the health of patients and the public. And they expect you to take prompt action if you think patient safety, dignity, or comfort is being compromised. So these are all kind of very logical things. Doctors are being as safe as possible, and they're being regulated by this body, the GMC. So what would you expect a medical student to have? Well, you would expect medical students and people applying to be medical students to have insight into their own health. So this is quite important, really. So doctors need to be very self-aware of whether they've got a physical, if they're physically ill, or possibly they've got a mental illness, whether that would compromise patient safety or compromise how well they could do their job. And so having insight into your own health is really important. So when you apply to medical school, they always ask whether you have any disabilities or whether you want to explain any kind of worries you have with respect to your own health. And they're not trying to filter you out. It sounds a bit scary. They just want to know, and they take it very seriously. I know in my years at medical school, each year they send out a questionnaire. They want to know if you've got any police convictions. They want to know if you've got any police warnings, whether you've been any illnesses you've had recently that could jeopardize your studies, etc. They want that handed in by a deadline. If you don't hand it in by a deadline, they'll penalize you. So they're really hot on making sure that you have insight into your own health. But this goes hand in hand with kind of managing your own risks, dealing effectively with problems, personal responsibility, conscientiousness. So they're looking for candidates who can really show that they have a lot of insight into their own health, but they also can take on roles and responsibilities. So you'd want to show that you can handle responsibility. And, not everything goes to plan. Everyone makes mistakes, but how do you react to those mistakes? That's the real question. And that's something that medical schools are looking for. Domain 3 is communication, partnership, and teamwork. So the GMC have said, well, your skills are really important. You need to stay, keep your skills up to date. They've also said, okay, you need to be as safe as possible. And now they're saying, well, you actually need to be able to be a team player. It's all well and good you being the best doctor in the world, but if you can't work with other people, then that's not going to work. You're not going to fit in a system like the NHS. And that's what makes, if you've ever seen House MD, he's really bad. Like he wouldn't do very well on domain 3. And so the General Medical Council, what do they expect from doctors? So they go, well, you need to treat patients as individuals and respect their dignity. I expect you to work in partnership with patients. And I expect you to also work well with colleagues in the best interests of patients. So obviously you respect patients as individuals, respect their dignity. That's kind of very obvious. And that goes hand in hand with kind of empathy, and kind of effective communication with patients and transparency. But working in partnership with patients is kind of a newer concept. So what we kind of talk about in medicine is the doctor-patient relationship. So it's what relation is there with patients as a doctor? And traditionally, it's what we used to call a paternal relationship. So it's very like father to their child. So doctors, certainly in the 1950s, 60s, 70s and onwards, would say, okay, I think you should do this, or you're having this surgery on here, or you're taking this medication. And the patient goes, yes, doctor. And sometimes you see that kind of mentality in older patients because that's what doctors used to be like. But nowadays, we're very much working in partnership with patients. You can say, well, I would recommend this, but at the end of the day, you have autonomy. And so it's kind of a new concept that we don't really like, this paternalistic relationship in medicine. We'd rather have kind of level playing field in a way. It makes it far easier to work with patients. So that's what we mean by that. And so as a medical student and as someone applying for medicine, they're looking for someone who respects that and just respects human life and really appreciates that someone has their own autonomy. And you've kind of seen examples of this in clinical practice, perhaps. But they're just generally looking for you to be able to communicate effectively, and communicating not just verbally, but also written tasks. It could be visually. All this kind of, you have to be a good communicator. You don't have to be the best. Medical school is going to help teach you that. You certainly have to be a good one. And that teamwork. So of course, 99% of candidates will say the word teamwork in their personal statement, but you need evidence for that. And we'll come to that in a little bit. But the last thing I wanted to quickly talk about, someone mentioned compassion on the word cloud previously. And this is something that I find kind of interesting. Empathy, sympathy, compassion, pity. What's the kind of difference between all of these? What medical schools are looking for, and as a medical student, you're growing, you're getting older, you're quite young when you start, 18, 19, and you leave when you're, what, 24, 25. So we're kind of looking for people with emotional intelligence. And so understanding the difference between empathy, sympathy, and what these means is emotionally intelligent and is a really good thing to understand. So my next slide, which is what is sympathy versus empathy? So some people talk about sympathy, some people talk about empathy, and I've seen it come up as questions in medical school interviews before. What's the difference? And it's really hard to kind of say. People have different opinions, but sympathy is very much, I kind of feel for you, and empathy is kind of, I understand. So as you can see here on this kind of fairly crude diagram, if I find my spotlight, there we are. Cool. Sympathy is kind of this direct mapping. So it's kind of, you're looking and you're going, gosh, I feel for you. That must be horrible. It doesn't take a huge amount of cognitive ability to be able to do that. Whereas empathy is far more complex. Empathy is very much understanding what someone is feeling by reflecting on similar experiences you have been through. So you're kind of, you're going back into your cortex and you're retrieving memories via your hippocampus, what have you, and you're going, okay, well, actually this created this emotion, and I can see how this situation was similar to the situation this person's in, and therefore I can kind of put myself in your shoes. It doesn't mean that if you've seen someone who has fallen off a ladder, you have to have fallen off a ladder yourself to be able to exhibit empathy. Some people might say that. I would argue that's untrue. I would say that you just have to go through some sort of experience where you're in a lot of pain and you can kind of place yourself in their shoes. Empathy is kind of an interesting one. If you read up about it, empathy's been observed in mice, dogs, and monkeys. It's typically seen as a higher cognitive thing and something that's quite unique to Homo sapiens, but I think that's kind of untrue. And that empathy is different in different people. Some people might show more empathy in certain situations than others. This graph's quite fun because when you look at compassion up here, compassion is the really, I'm here to help. So it's kind of one more. So if someone asks you what's the difference in compassion, sympathy, empathy, then you could always refer to this graph. But it's interesting because candidates will always talk about empathy in their personal statements, but do you really know what you're talking about when you say that? So it's worth digging into this a little deeper as we have. So finally, domain 4. So we've been through the three domains of your knowledge and your skills. We've been through the safety aspect. We've been through the communication aspect. And now we're going to the kind of fundamental, really rock bottom, maintaining trust. If you don't have trust in a doctor-patient relationship, then there may as well not be a doctor. So what did the General Medical Council expect from doctors? They expect them to be honest and open and act with integrity. So we said transparency in the word cloud. That was wonderful. Not to discriminate and not to abuse trust or the public's trust in the profession. So certainly, this is quite an interesting thing about trust. When you start looking in other countries and different systems of healthcare, certainly in the US, where it's a private healthcare system, potentially there's less trust for some reason in doctors than in the NHS. You could argue, it might not be true everywhere. It's certainly not a blanket statement. But there's lots of things that could undermine trust. If you think about to your own experiences, if you've ever gone to see the GP or you've been into hospital, if you remember a doctor specifically, was it good or was it bad? And what did they do? Did they do something wrong? Did they kind of make you feel a little bit uneasy? Did they forget your name or they called you something incorrect? And then you kind of lose your trust. There's a very small time frame when someone can really gain your trust and really connect with you. And doctors need to kind of learn how to do that and certainly be open to that. So the Medical Schools Council, they read this and they said, well, candidates should be honest. That's such an important aspect. Treating others with respect and the ability to take responsibility for your own actions is really important. And so if you're able to show some of these qualities, then you're matching it to this domain. So what I'm trying to get with all these domains is I'm trying to help you here by stating a load of attributes of a good doctor and mapping it to what the GMC, who regulates all doctors in the UK, what they say a doctor should be. And so when you're hitting these kind of domains, when you're ticking off skills that are precursors to these attributes of a doctor, these are the kind of core fundamental skills that medical schools are looking for. So what happens if you don't kind of meet these criteria as a doctor? Well, there's lots of cases in history about doctors not really following the guidelines or something going wrong. You might recognize this picture. It's a little bit old now. So this is Dr. Bauer-Garber. She was a ST6, so specialist registrar in pediatrics in 2011. And this boy here, his name was Jack Adcock. He was a 6-year-old boy, and he was admitted to Leicester Royal Infirmary in 2011. Essentially, he died later that day in part due to failings in his treatment. And Dr. Bauer-Garber was found kind of guilty of not upholding some of the standards of the GMC, along with a nurse, and it became a hugely messy case. This case isn't really used to talk about kind of standards in the GMC because it's rather muddled. Dr. Bauer-Garber took a lot of stick, essentially, for what happened. She definitely made some errors and she didn't uphold some of the values of the GMC in that GMC Good Medical Practice. However, there was a lot of other fundamental failings within the hospital. There was issues with hierarchy. There was understaffing. She'd just come back from a maternity leave. And there were multiple failings, which essentially led to this young boy being misdiagnosed. He had sepsis. He then took some medication he shouldn't have, and he went into cardiac arrest, and they weren't able to save his life. In theory, if those failings didn't happen, he would still be alive today. So this is kind of an interesting case, and it's worth reading up. So it's Dr. Bauer-Garber. She was initially told not to practice for a certain period of time. Then the General Medical Council, who represent patients, were very much like, well, hold on, not allowed to practice for a set period of time. I think she should be struck off and never be allowed to practice. So they struck her off. And then the GMC came back and they said, well, not the GMC, sorry, the BMA, who represent doctors' values, they said, well, actually, it's not all her fault. And perhaps perhaps she's going to be one of the more safer doctors now. She's never going to make that mistake again for certain. And so actually she's now practicing again. And it was a major landmark kind of case between the GMC and the BMA. Occasionally this is asked in interviews. They'll ask you about some current affairs. It was asked when I was applying to medical school, but there are lots more very much kind of newer topics to talk about. COVID, for example. So where do you, I didn't write that particularly well. Where do you could demonstrate these qualities? Where do you think you could demonstrate these qualities? So we're going to go back to Mentimeter. I'm going to ask everyone, well, now that I've just trundled on and yabbered on about all these different qualities you should probably have, how do you think you could demonstrate them? What do you think? Come up with some ideas. You can write anything. How do you think you could demonstrate the qualities of a good doctor? It's a kind of funny question. There's no right or wrong answer technically. But what do you think? Have a think. How would you, when I was talking about safety, for example, and I was saying, oh, well, medical students and people applying to medicine should be kind of honest and work with integrity and show that they're willing to kind of learn from their mistakes. Well, how would you, if you were going to write your personal statement now, what would you say? What kind of examples? Because it's all well and good saying, oh, I have lots of integrity and I'm very honest, but what kind of evidence could you give? Activities as a group is definitely true. Brilliant. Yes, real life examples. What kind of real life examples? There we are. What kind of real life examples? Experience in healthcare, 100%. If you've got previous experience, that's wonderful. It's very hard to come across, but it is kind of like gold dust, really. School projects, 100%. Yeah. Team sports. Yeah. Tutoring, 100%. Yes. So think about as a tutor. So tutor is a wonderful example because when you're writing a personal statement, you say, well, I think I have good communicational skills and I'm good at working in a team. And I have good organizational skills too, which is really important because that's a precursor to being able to balance, having a good work-life balance and being able to learn and constantly study new material, which is true in medical school and beyond as a doctor. You could go, well, how does tutoring prove that? Well, you go, well, actually, when I started out as a tutor, I was tutoring some kids and I was showing them actually, this is what the GCSE science syllabus looks like, what have you. And actually, I realized that they weren't maybe learning as well as I thought they would, or actually a couple of the kids were far more visual than I thought they would be. And so I realized, oh, actually, my learning style maybe isn't the same as everyone. And so you kind of change it up. And actually, I did a little online course on how to tutor, or I improved by reading up a bit more. And now I feel like I've improved those skills. That's the kind of stuff they're looking for. Volunteering, yeah, 100%. Volunteering, where? Give us a little guess. Where would you volunteer? Where could you volunteer? Reflecting on experiences, yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what I did. You're reflecting on experiences. You're showing growth. You're showing that critical thinking. So when we talk about the kind of safety domain, reflecting on your practice, medical schools love it when you reflect. Yeah, care homes, yeah, and in hospitals, yeah, volunteering in hospitals and care homes. Where else could you volunteer? It doesn't have to be in a medical setting. So you could be volunteering as a tutor, or it could be a paid role. What other ones? Can anyone hazard a guess? If not, that's fine. What we'll do is I'll roll back and I'll say, well, where could you demonstrate these qualities? And the answer really is anywhere. Anywhere. I think I spoke last week about demonstrating some of these skills. And I said one of the kind of strongest personal statements that I've heard of was someone who didn't have particularly much medical experience. I think they did a couple of days in GP or something, and that was it. But they worked in KFC. And they did a huge amount of customer kind of relations and dealing with customers. And actually that showed a huge amount of growth and was really important. And so it doesn't have to be in a hospital. So these are the kind of things that the Medical Schools Council said, well, we think people who want to apply to medicine could show some of these skills in these places. So volunteer work we spoke about, 100%. Experience of paid employment. Just because you do a job and you get paid for it doesn't mean you can't use it in your personal statement. Work experience placements are the kind of, that's the gold dust. That's the, I did 2 days in GP surgery, or I did 2 days in respiratory. I think it's very easy to get really stressed as a year 12 or year 13 trying to get work experience and trying to get it in, I want to get it in obs and gynae clinic, or I really want to see a neurology outpatient. You don't have to do that. You really honestly do not have to have it specific to medicine. It can be anywhere. Participation in social activities, for example, an educational experience. So you're always going to talk about what you've kind of learned in school, whether you did any extra projects and what went wrong with them, how you overcame some of those challenges. But certainly in like social activities, are you a captain of the sports team? Are you the captain of the, school Lego club or something? It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just those skills are ubiquitous in society. And if you can demonstrate that you have some of these skills, and then you can refer it back to some of these domains and some of these kind of, well, actually, I think a doctor should be very professional. They're not expecting the medical student to have honed in their professionalism. But what they are expecting is that actually I'm honest and I like to reflect on my work. And this is a precursor to professionalism, which is vital in medicine, especially for maintaining patient trust. So it's kind of linking those dots. So when would you mention this in your application timeline? So I know this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but it's sometimes quite useful. So when would you talk about your work experience and your qualities of a doctor? Well, you would certainly talk about it in your personal statement in your UCAS application. So your personal statement is due, I think it's like October the 14th, I dare say, somewhere around that time. It's due for Oxford, Cambridge, medicine, veterinary. And so it's a 4,000 word, 4,000 character document. There was a lot more. 6med runs some good courses on how to write personal statements effectively. This is where in your personal statement, you really show off, oh, I did some time working at a jumble sale and something happened and it made me think, gosh, that's really silly of me. And so I went back and I learned how to do this better. And I came back and actually, I think that the fact that I've got a growing mindset and that I improve constantly is a precursor to, a life in medicine where I'm constantly learning, but also teaching, whatever. And then, to be honest, the aptitude tests, they're kind of another kettle of fish, and we'll talk about them at a later date. So those are the UK CAT and BMAT. The interview is where, again, they'll ask you about your work experience, or they'll ask you about, well, do you think you're good at working in a team? And you could just say yes. But if you expand and you give an example about when I did something, then that gives you evidence. And so the application and the interview are the two main points when you're really going to be showing the qualities of a doctor. And it's not just having those qualities. It's what I previously mentioned, recognizing the qualities in a doctor. And that's where GMC Good Medical Practice comes in. Okay, so I've been through some of the qualities of a good doctor, and I talked a little bit about GMC Good Medical Practice. And then I talked about how to develop and demonstrate some of these skills and qualities. And I certainly refer you back to GMC Good Medical Practice is the kind of Bible here. What I've also used is the Medical Schools Council advice on the kind of attributes and qualities that medical people applying to medicine should have. And the Medical Schools Council also have some really good advice on work experience for medical students. And this advice is really important because everyone gets their knickers in a twist about trying to get a placement a week in a top surgery or what have you. You know, if you work once, twice a weekend, twice a time at a weekend at a KFC or what have you, that can be just as good, if not better. Depends what you learn from it, really. Okay, so I've got a Q&A. I've kind of raced through this. It's 20 to 7. I hope that kind of helped you a little bit there. But if you've got any questions, please ask me anything, literally anything to do with this. I hope it's been helpful. I've tried to keep it as kind of quick and as concise as possible, and how you can kind of achieve these. I can't just tell you how to get these skills, because you have to have your own experiences to get them, to obtain them. What I'm saying is that you can obtain these from anywhere where you can make a mistake, or you come into contact with people, or you learn something, is where you can gain these skills and develop them and provide examples. So any questions? How do I control my nerves before my interview? That is a very good question. Gosh, I mean, it depends. You'll hear everyone say, oh, nerves are a good thing. Maybe they are. To an extent. A little bit of adrenaline is good. There's actually a really good side note. There's a really good map, actually. Someone's mapped out a stress and performance, and stress performance. As your stress increases, your performance increases to a point, and then it drops off. So you become overstressed, and that's your burnout. So controlling your nerves, I can only say from personal experience. I'll have one coffee beforehand, no more if you're a coffee drinker. Breathing exercises, I think, is hugely, hugely important. Just being able to breathe in and out and just stay relaxed and calm is really important. To have kind of revised everything, feel confident in your knowledge, but always remember that you are you're all in the same boat. And I've had some wonderful, hilarious conversations with other medical students. I remember when stressed before an exam, you just chat absolute rubbish. But sometimes just chatting helps, and you'll notice people are really willing to talk to you before interviews. So just do that, engage in that, and just calm yourself down and breathe. I think that's all. Honestly, you're always going to be stressed, but you'll get through it. I hope that helps. I'm just going to look at the Q&A box, which is what topics were discussed in the previous session. Okay, so with the previous session, we discussed basically what's it like to be a medical student and how do you apply. So it was a bit of the fundamentals. What's my life like as a medical student right now? What do I do? What do I get up to? What do I learn? And then we spoke about, well, how do you actually get into medicine? What's it like? I think that's recorded. My advice would be email 6med if you want to get hold of that, because it was recorded. I'm sure they'd be able to help you with that. How to deal with rejection and stay motivated. I mean, rejection is kind of a natural, rejection is kind of an inevitability when you are working in something like this. I think the thing to think about is, okay, you got rejected, but you got good GCSE results, you passed your GCSEs, you might have got amazing GCSE results, and you did well at your A levels, and actually, you know, you've managed to get a personal statement in before the deadline, and that actually you did a load of work experience and you changed a few people's lives, and actually you helped at the care home, and actually Doreen or what have you who was there actually really appreciated it. That doesn't sound like a failure, really. That sounds like someone who's really lovely and is really caring and is really compassionate and is really driven. I had a physics teacher who told me it's not if you get into medicine, it's when you get into medicine. Some of the strongest people in both the medics, and I work with veterinary kind of pathologists and stuff now, some of the best students I've seen are people who were rejected first time round or took a gap year and are just a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and then come back at it full swing. You are probably going to be a far stronger candidate if you are rejected. I honestly will say that, and I think that's true. One tip I heard: when you're nervous, convince yourself you're excited instead, since your body has similar physiological reactions for both. So it literally convince itself. Very true. That's the sympathetic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. I mean, I'll give that a try. I've heard that too. Well, we've got two people saying that, a third, and we can make a paper out of it. Have a wee, yeah. You could have a wee, but you inevitably, sod's law, you will need a wee during the interview anyway. So it kind of sucks. Unfortunately, that's human physiology. But if you're doing medicine, then you enjoy it. What was your main focus for applying for medicine? Oh, I think it was kind of misguided. I think as a medical student, you can reflect on it a bit more, and everything's easier to look at in retrospect, and you can figure out what you did wrong or where you should improve. What I focused on was work experience. I did a bit in GP. I did a little bit in hospital, but the making of me was helping out in a care home, literally volunteering. I got really good playing chess with this old guy, basically. He was lovely. I got to know his whole life story. And I was there in his last kind of few months, really, of his life. And I kind of saw this gradual deterioration with dementia. But what was kind of really heartwarming was by the end of it, I'd almost been there. I would go once a week for like a couple of hours on a Tuesday afternoon. But I did that for almost 2 years. You don't have to do it for 2 years. That sounds really excessive. But it was really nice because by the end of it, even though he had only known me through his dementia, never knew my name, but he recognized my face and he smiled when I came into the room. And that was really lovely to see. And I had loads of experiences there. I made loads of mistakes. I had one lady fall over when I was meant to make sure she didn't fall over. And then they had to get paramedics in. And I was bricking it. It was horrible. But I was honest and I explained it actually was my fault. And then the staff were actually saying, well, you know, it's actually our fault because we should have been there. You're not qualified really to be watching this person. And so I spoke about that at interview. I said, actually, I've made a terrible mistake and a lady nearly broke her leg because I wasn't watching her. But I was honest about it. And I think that kind of worked. And I actually got an offer from that university. So I think any experience really is really key. And being able to get this experience when you're doing your A-levels or your IB shows that you've got this kind of balancing. You can balance your academic life and your kind of extracurricular life, but also go out with friends, see friends, and relax because you may get into, I'm sure you'll get into medicine if you don't relax with friends, but you're not going to survive medical school if you don't have an outlet to go for a run or go for a drink with friends or what have you. I hope that helps. I'll mark that as answered. I didn't get the best GCSEs. Will I be okay? I would say, yeah, you'll be fine, provided you have good A-levels or IB. GCSEs, they kind of have a little cut-off occasionally, but some are kind of getting rid of that. As long as your GCSEs are still above the cut-off for like English, usually they have a requirement for maths and English language. As long as you're above that cutoff, you're only going to be competing against people with your A-levels and your work experience and what have you, or your IB. So I hope that kind of helps. Don't get too caught up on GCSEs because I can tell you that the universities don't get too caught up on GCSEs because they look at that and they see that as old data. That was 2 years ago. They're looking at you going, great, well, that's what my candidate was like 2 years ago. But actually, I want to see their predicted, and I actually want to read their personal statement, and I want to bring them in for interview because that's how you know. And so I wouldn't stress too much about GCSEs. Certainly, some high ranked Oxford and Cambridge might be a bit more picky, but they're only being picky because they've got more applicants, and so they're going to have to really start stratifying through people. I hope that helps. 2 gap years, redoing A levels in GCSE English, working as an HCA and volunteering, feeling scared because of the impacts of COVID on med schools. How to cope? That's amazing. As an HCA, I think HCA work is gold dust. If you're an HCA, God, you're going to make a good doctor. HCA work is so hard. I did a bit of HCA work and I have the utmost respect for them. You've done volunteering here. You're redoing your A levels in GCSE English. Fantastic. You're taking 2 gap years, so you're a mature student. You're feeling scared because of the impacts of COVID on medical schools. Yeah, there's an impact of COVID on medical schools. There's an impact of COVID on everyone's lives. I don't think anyone's the same anymore. But how to cope is to know, God, you're already amazing. Medical schools are really going to love you because you have been working as an HCA. You've got that advanced volunteering experience. You've taken gap years. You're a mature student. You're at this point, you're going to have a huge amount of what I previously talked about, that kind of emotional intelligence. You're redoing your A levels in GCSE English. Again, these are just grades. At the end of the day, if you can get above the grades that they're requiring, you can put a really good statement forward, you can get in. If they say something like, the only worry is if they were to say something like, we don't accept retaken A levels, so say if you had failed chemistry and you retook chemistry. Some universities, not all, would say, we want you to do your A levels first time. However, if you then got a degree like biomedical sciences or history, any degree, they then look at that degree and they ignore the A levels. So again, as I previously said, it's not a matter of if you get into medicine. If you're driven enough, it's a matter of when you get into medicine. And of course you feel scared. I think everyone kind of feels scared in a way. I'm not devaluing your point there. I totally agree. And I think medical schools appreciate that. And once you're into medical school, they will do everything they can to keep you there and keep you happy. I really like, wow, the fact that you've done 2 gap years, you're redoing the A levels and you're coming back to it just shows how driven you are. And I really wish the best to you. And if I was a medical school, I'd let you in. What's the right balance between the care of your patient is your first concern and taking care of yourself as a doctor? Okay, so this is difficult because if you can't take care of yourself as a doctor and then that impacts your well-being and impacts your care, then you can't care for your patient. But if you can still care for your patient just as well as you usually would, but it's taking a toll on you, then that's intrinsically a bad thing. It's kind of chicken and egg scenario here. The right balance is that potentially there shouldn't be a balance. Maybe it's the fact that you should be as well as you can be. That's really hard. That's a really horrible question. I think again, as soon as you feel like that your role as a doctor, that you are not giving it your best and that you're potentially jeopardizing patient safety, then you should recommend that they go see another doctor. Of course, you're going to have bad days and your job's going to take a toll on you, but it's maintaining that internal reflection. We talk about insight in things like psychiatry. So if a patient has something like bipolar disorder, when they're in a manic state, they may not realize they have bipolar. So they don't have insight into their illness, essentially. And so sometimes when you're burnt out, you don't realize you're burnt out. So you don't have insight into that. And so you want to look after patients and maintain that insight. When you start to lose that insight, then you're in the red zone and you're burnt out and you can't help yourself. Just looking through here. Brilliant. Yeah. So Himani said in the chat their kind of opinion on the previous question. I 100% agree with you. Yeah, that's amazing. Yep. If you say that in an interview, geez, you'll get in. That's brilliant. Well done. 100% agree. Do I need to bring certificates or proof for any activities I do at the interview? No, you don't. So when you'll go for an interview and they essentially, if you say anything in your personal statement, they will go, okay, well, they're telling the truth, because that's, if you're lying, you shouldn't be a doctor. But once you get an offer, if you get an offer, they'll ask to see your certificates. So don't say, I've got a degree in aerospace engineering, when you don't, because they will ask you for a degree. But you don't need to bring it to the interview, don't worry. If they give you an offer, they'll ask to see it, and they might ask to see it in person, in which case you go up to the uni, which is what I had to do, or they might ask for a scan copy, what have you. How to deal with rejection and stay motivated? I've already answered that question. If a patient is rude or offensive to you as a colleague, when is it right to draw the line to deny healthcare as they operate others at risk? Wow, this is like an OSCE station, isn't it? I think this is the difficulty here, is that if you are a GP or someone, you're providing care to this patient, it's all about context. Is this patient delirious? Is this patient mentally unwell? Is this patient going through a stressful period? I know it's not acceptable to be like this, but you're going to have to contextualize it in your mind. Are you still going to have to give this person medical care after? Or are you not going to see them after? That will kind of change your perception here. Maybe if you are giving them long-time care, it's going to be easier to have a word with them, but try and maintain that trust, because that trust is very delicate. But if they're being offensive and rude to a colleague, then you can say, actually, no, this is unacceptable and I wouldn't expect that. Trust is a two-way thing. And if you trust me, I trust you. And I trust you to respect me as I respect you. It sounds a bit like the kind of conversation you'd have in a primary school, but it's true. And so, yeah, you wouldn't deny them healthcare, just as how you don't deny people who are convicted of assault and things. You don't deny them healthcare when they're in prison. So everyone's entitled to that. It's kind of a fundamental right, but you could arguably refer them on to another service or have a word, etc. What is something you wish you knew before applying to medicine? I wish I knew I was good at what I did. I wish someone just went, you know what, well done, you're doing really well. Because it feels like no one does that for your application, and that really sucks. And so I hope all of you guys know the fact that you've turned up today. You're doing fantastically, and congratulations. Oh, I'm just looking, someone raised a hand. Just checking the Q&A. Which unis would you recommend applying to? I mean, that is so subjective. And I previously mentioned that in the previous talk. So if you can get hold, email 6med, look for the recording on there. I spoke about different unis and how they work. And it fundamentally is an intrinsic part about yourself. Do you like living in a city? Do you like living in the countryside? Do you want to work in London, which is kind of very busy, it's very diverse, very multicultural, maybe it's a bit more high pressure. You're seeing different age groups, you're seeing different kind of ethnicities, etc. Or you're going to be working out in kind of more a rural area. You know, if you go to Barts, where I am, I'm deep in East London, so I'm seeing a huge amount of cultures. We see tuberculosis, which is something you wouldn't usually see. You go to Exeter Medical School, you're going to have a kind of a slightly older population. So you're going to see different kind of ethnicities around there. You're going to see different ways of life. You're going to see different socioeconomic climates. Again, it's also about the medical school. Do you like a campus or do you want a city? Do you want to do PBL taught things where you work within groups and you research yourself, or do you want to be spoon-fed with a lecturer? Do you want to have 3 years where you just learn pure bookwork and then 3 years where you see the patients? Or do you want to see a couple of patients in your first year occasionally in a GP practice? All of these are things to think about. I want to take pharmacy. Pharmacology is my 5th choice for UCAS. I got to today that I wouldn't get in. It's not some medicine, it's too competitive. Is this true? Please up. Okay, so it depends where you're applying. If you're applying for pharmacology at Oxford, then they'll be looking for a specific statement, a personal statement that's specific, and they can tell that you're a medical student. But see, I was kind of struck at whether I would do a fifth choice, and I said to myself, actually, I'm not going to put a fifth choice because I want to get into medicine. And if I don't get into medicine, I'd rather take a gap year and try again. If you want to do pharmacology, that's fantastic. It depends what university you're going to go to. I wonder who said I got told today that I won't get in. I mean, I won't get in. You're a medical student, so you're fairly good academically, and you're clearly a well-rounded person. So the only reason you wouldn't get in is that they see your personal statement and they go, oh, you're not committed. You actually want to be a medic. And I think a lot of universities understand that, and they know that people are good at chemistry as medics, and actually they have a lot of shared interests. Depends where you're applying. Again, too competitive. If you're applying to a big name Russell Group, potentially going to be harder than a smaller university that's less known for pharmacology. I would say that's untrue, though. It depends where you're applying. You'd have to give me a lot more context. I think if you get into medicine, then you're not going to have to worry about this. I'm sure you will. I hope that helps. I'm not a pharmacologist. Is the personal statement more to show your passion or to show you'll be a good doctor, give examples of skills, qualities? Okay, yes. So those are not mutually exclusive. You can show that you have a passion for it by discussing the skills and qualities. If you write, I have a passion for medicine, then you've already fallen down the pit hole if you're saying and not describing. You should be saying, well, actually, I did this and I was interested in this. And so I went to a little talk on heart failure. It doesn't matter if it was a university level thing. I was interested in hearts, and I was in the care home and I saw Jeremy, and he had he was coughing all the time. And he said to me, I got heart failure. And I was like, what is that? So I had a little look and I saw a little webinar and I watched a bit about heart failure. And then I learned, that must be what he suffers through. And then I considered, blah, 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 blah. I didn't explicitly say that I had a passion, but it was very obvious that I was interested in medicine. You don't have to say I have a passion. By talking about your experiences, you're showing that you have a passion. Books is good. I didn't write particularly about many books. I would say don't fall down the pitfall of talking about books and saying, oh yeah, well, I read loads of this and this was really good. It's like, that's not great. Like, that's a book review. What you want to say is, I read this book and it made me think this, and thus I went on and did this, and it inspired me to do this. If you're going to talk about a book, probably talk about one, maybe two. I would say one. If you don't talk about any books, that's fine. Don't get stressed. Everyone's read Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt, so I wouldn't stress. Will you be doing more of these? Also, how can I contact you? Yes, I'm doing more of these. So I'm kind of contracted out by SixMed, and I'm helping out SixMed with these. I get told kind of what the topic is each week, and then I write up a PowerPoint. You can get in contact with me directly by looking at my email. So as I previously mentioned, if I go back, my email's here. It's the Royal Veterinary College email. That's the one that I'm answering most commonly now. Sorry, it's not my medical email address. You can take a picture of that if you want, or you can contact the SixMed team, who can put you in contact with me. Adam's Kay's book is a little over dramatic, meant to be satire. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, Adam Kay's book is a bit dramatic, but I mean, if you want to talk about it, go for it, but link it back into something a bit more tangible, perhaps. How do you know medicine was for you? So, I mean, depends. I first started thinking about medicine because near GCSE time, after GCSE time, I binge watched House MD. And it was really fun, and I really liked it. And I thought, you know what, this is silly, but the medicine side, I never thought about it. And I was good at like the sciencey side and stuff, and I was always quite good at chatting to people. So I went on some hospital trusts will do little courses. They'll do like intro to medicine. And so I went on one of these, and basically what they did is they sent a group email around to the entire hospital and said, any consultants willing to talk about this for half an hour to a load of students? And we got a few consultants come in, they talked about their jobs. And I was like, actually, I could probably do this. I don't want to be stuck in a lab all the time. I kind of know that I want to be outdoors, not outdoors, but like, walking around doing something and helping people. And so that's I realized that the two kind of converged on medicine. I think if you're 100% dedicated, not dedicated, if you're 100% yes, I know medicine's for me and I've always known it, then that's like a bit suspect. Of course, you're going to self-doubt yourself. It's only human to really question, actually, do I want to? It's scary. It's a scary thought. Do I want to spend the rest of my life doing medicine? Because inevitably you are. 99% of graduates do that. I think if you are unsure, this is what work experience is for. It's not only for application and helping you grow as a person. Gosh, it's so that you enjoy it. If you go into hospital and you actually go, this sucks, I hate it, then it's probably not for you. At the end of the day, the work experience, the main thing of work experience is to know whether you want to do that job. And then you learn things on it. And this is how it's now become, you need work experience to apply for medicine. Well, of course you do, because you need to know that you want to do the job that you're applying to do, if you catch my drift. I got A, B, and the B was a non-science subject, and that's why I'm redoing it. I was 1 mark off by TAG as well. I mean, I go to Barts. My previous housemate got in with A, B, B, I think. It depends what clearing looks like all the time. Non-science subject, amazing. The best medics I've come across are the kind of people who took a history subject or like geography. They're some of the most well-rounded students. So yeah, credit where credit's due. That's amazing. I really hope it goes well for you. Do English schools also have adjusted grades? Yes, they do. So based on postcode, we have, what do we call it? They're not called gateway. They're called like foundation or like year 0. So typically, to widen access to medicine, because it's completely true. Adam Kay, the guy who wrote This Is Going to Hurt, which he said on a radio show a few days ago or something. He says, well, I think actually the best medics are not the people who get the top grades. They're actually the most kind of well-rounded people who have had bigger life experiences. And to an extent, I 100% agree. And so a lot of medical schools, in England are now looking for applicants that didn't get the A-star AA or what have you, but, maybe come from a less well-off area. And so what they do is they look at postcodes and they look at people applying. And typically you apply for this, you specify, actually, I want to do this foundation year. I'm in a certain postcode, not particularly well off. My parents earn this much money and stuff. And so they go, oh yeah, well, we'll adjust the grades for you. So there'll be lower grades to get in. So typically it's not like a chemistry course or something where they'll let you into the first year of chemistry with lower grades. Medicine will let you in with lower grades, but you'll have to do an extra year. That's how it goes typically, because they want everyone up to the same par. It's just how it is. It's not available to everyone. Speak to the uni, speak to the admission staff is my advice. Do medical professors mark extra work you give it? How much support do you get? I mean, why are you doing extra work? If you are, maybe. I mean, I'm currently writing like an extra essay. So we have essay competitions. I'm writing one in pathology because I'm interested in that, and you can win some money out of it. I'm hoping to send it to one of the professors at the RBC that I know, and he's a pathologist, and he can at least look through and go, Joe, you did this really wrong, or Joe, this was good. It depends on the relationship you have, really. How much support you get depends again on the medical school. Somewhere like Southampton, which is a big campus university, they are really good. They're really well known for supporting students. So it's quite a gradual kind of acclimatization. Where I went in London, you're thrown in their city campus. So you're literally living to people who are not in the university next to you. Maybe there's less support. It depends how much support you need, how much support you want, and what support technically. Hope that helps. My school told me to give up trying for medicine, that I'd never get in. Oh, that's not particularly nice of the school. If they told you that, my next question naturally would be why? What's their reasoning behind that? And if they told you the reasoning, you want to know, well, how can I rectify this? How can I change it? If it's because you've retaken your A-levels a load of times and that you're actually going to be barred from a load of medical schools, well, then there's other routes in, getting another degree and then trying to do a graduate entry program. So get into graduate medicine. People say it's really hard, and it is hard, but if you're really dedicated, you can get in. There's always other ways. That really sucks. I'm really sorry. I'm sure you will. Don't listen to your school. How much free time do you personally have as a med student to join club societies, hang out with friends? Yeah, we had a similar question last week. Yes, you should always have a bit of free time. It might not be as much as your other friends who are lit students who are only going for 2 lectures a week, or what have you, and spend a lot of study time. There always should be some time to enjoy going out with friends or what have you. So certainly Wednesday afternoons is traditionally a sports afternoon. So you join a sports club or something. Sports clubs are really important because it's not just the sports. They often give academic help and they often become a tight-knit society. Would recommend joining. If you are finding at medical school that you don't have enough time to relax or socialize, you're either in your final year of medicine or you're doing it wrong. That's my advice. You always have time to kind of relax. If you never had any time to relax, and you'll see a lot on social media of these med students' lives where they just work consistently, you're just going to get burnt out and it's not going to be favorable for yourself. And if anything, you're just going to hurt yourself because it's not like school. No one's there going to tell you, actually, no, stop. You have to tell yourself you're now an adult. I always wonder, how do hospitals deal with racism for patients? How would someone respond to that? Again, this is why hospitals have security and things. If things got violent, there are protocols. It very much depends where you are, who you're working with. If you're on a geriatrics ward, I dare say you might find people saying things that maybe they wouldn't usually say because they're not 100% complimentous. You might turn a blind eye to certain things like that. But certainly in regular practice, it's unacceptable. And just as you show respect to the patient, they should show respect to yourself. And some people would turn a blind eye, but I would 100% agree that, you know, there's a line and you cross that and I'm not treating you. You can go home and you can come back another day and actually reevaluate what you just said. You're not going to be asked that, don't worry. Is there a higher chance to get into a new medical school? Ooh, okay. In theory, maybe. I don't know. I honestly don't know. My logic would be people don't know the name, so less people are applying. Perhaps depends on the number of places they have. Bear in mind they're a new medical school, so there might be some teething issues, but certainly worth. If you go see it in person, if you like it and you think it's going to be good, pop it on your 4 choices. What I would say though is do put a university on there that you are like only 20-25% sure you'd get into, because sometimes, you know, you can amaze yourself and you can get into these things. Medical school choice is a really hard thing, and I would advise that you think very hard about it. It's probably, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't go, oh, I want to go anywhere, because actually when you do get there, if it's rubbish, you're not going to have a nice 5 years. Cool, so I've come to the end of those questions. Have we got any more questions? That one, answer this one, answer that one, answer this one. Any other questions? You've got me here for a little bit longer. If you've got any other questions about anything, feel free to ask. But otherwise, thank you very much for turning up. This is recorded, so if you want to rewatch it, please get in contact with the SixMed team. They'll give you the recording. Thank you so much. I've been Joe. If you'd like to email me, please let me know. Ooh, how do you have money to spend on yourself as a med student because there's no time for jobs? No, I mean, I'm a med student, I'm doing this as a job, I get paid. So it depends. I would say so traditionally you don't have particularly, like you can't really work that much when you're in medical school. There are ways. I would say tutoring. Medical schools are really, medical students are really sought after for kind of helping people get into medicine, giving talks like this, maybe running MMI courses like SixBed do. There is employment out there for medical students. You just have to be a bit canny, and it tends to be related to it. You could work weekends if you really wanted. You could work a shift at the weekend. You just have to balance it. You have to have that organizational skills. I assume you would get a student loan. That would help kind of cover it. And if you are really struggling, often these universities will help you. You will never drop out of university because you don't have enough money. If you are fearful that you would drop out because you have no money, university will scoop you up with a bursary, financial hardship bursary, they call it. Basically, what I'm saying is the hardest thing is getting into med school. Once you're in, it's very hard to get out. You have to do something very, very, very silly. And they're going to really try and help you. So I hope that helps. Cool. I think that's it. I think that's all. When is the next webinar? Same time next week, I believe. It's 7 o'clock here on this link. I'm not too sure what it's on. They usually publish it. And I will make a little PowerPoint, and we'll do a bit more Menti because I can get your guys' input on this. I hope you found it really helpful. And I mean, please let me know how things are going. If you want advice on A-levels or the application process, just give me a little bit of advice here or there. I'm always here. I wish I had a med student to chat to throughout my application process. And if you've got any friends who are applying to medicine, more than welcome to join. But yeah, I hope this has been helpful. Have a fantastic Friday, nearly the weekend. Yeah, and I'll see you all next week. Oh, I'm just seeing a couple more questions. Is there a good structure to which universities you put down? Like one you know is a bit easier to get into? Yes, you can kind of play your cards right. I mean, you get 4 picks, so choose. I would say don't go off these whole leaderboard things. Go off student satisfaction sometimes. Have a look at the student satisfaction, because all students are asked to fill out these really long forms. They're really dull. But they ask for your opinion on certain things, whether you like the med school or not. Have a look and see, because some universities have really bad ones, and maybe that's not one you'd want to get into. Yeah, I would put your kind of, I was always advised, have one that's your like dream one. Like, it's really hard to get into, but it's your dream one, because if you don't put it down, you won't get in flat out. You know, you cheesy, but you don't get 100%. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. There we are. There's the cheesy quote. And I would maybe put one that you think is easier to get into to help yourself out. Yeah, it's a bit like a card game. You have to kind of play your cards right. How do you cope with stress? Exercise, to be honest. I run quite a bit, so that really helps me, and socializing. Living in a house not with other medical students, I find it's really good for stress, because when I go into the kitchen, and I chat to my friends, sit in the living room or what have you, I chat about other things, other hobbies. I have a hobby, I really like coffee, I like espresso. So I chat to my friends about espresso. Or I live on a campus, basically, a veterinary campus. So we talk about dogs and we look at the dogs as they all go to the vets. Just mundane things like that. But it's better than talking about cardiomegaly in infants. And that really relieves stress, not to have to constantly think about your subject. I would advise against living with loads and loads of other medical students, but sometimes some people thrive off that. Depends who they are. But that's how to cope with stress, I would say. Exercise, enjoying being with friends and having a good home life where you can really settle down in like a nice halls or something like that. Hope that helps. Cool. I think that's everything. So I'm going to say thank you to the last two people here, and I'm going to end it. So thank you very much.